The GOP is facing blowback for heckling President Biden during his State of the Union address last night after he accurately pointed out that several Republicans had proposed cutting Social Security and Medicare. Meanwhile, Marjorie Taylor Greene stood up and shouted in a fur coat like a real housewife who wasn't allowed into a reunion show. But other than that, Republicans had a pretty great night. For more on this, it's time for a closer look. You might remember that after Donald Trump's rogues gallery of doofuses got creamed in the midterm elections, the big takeaway for Republicans was just be normal. That was basically their clear eyes, full heart, can't lose. Trump and his MAGA allies in the GOP handpicked a bunch of ostentatious weirdos like vampire enthusiast Herschel Walker, Pixar villain Carrie Lake, and Area 51 escapee Dr. Oz, who campaigned for Senate in Pennsylvania by wandering down the produce aisle complaining about the price of crudité at a grocery store he called Wegner's, which does not exist. Of course, the weirdest part of that video was always the fact that he grabbed salsa for a crudité. Who puts salsa in their crudité? He's like a college sophomore putting out hors d'oeuvres for a date. Would you like some Funyuns with your crudité? Perhaps some Franzia? I have a January Chardonnay. That's a very good month. So after those candidates lost, Republicans spent the next few days lamenting how weird their party had gotten and pleading for Republicans to just be normal again.
The Republican Party needs to do a really deep introspection look in the mirror right now, because this is an absolute disaster for the Republican Party.
The GOP fielded too many novices who struggled with crafting a message, raising funds, and waging effective campaigns. Some were also knuckleheads with strange beliefs and closets full of problems.
We've attracted these more cartoon characters, and if somebody speaking at a rally with a president or a presidential candidate is best known as a pillow salesman, run to high heaven.
Okay, but if that pillow salesman is Mike Lindell, it doesn't matter how far you run, you will never be out of range for his voice. True story. They say if you listen closely, you can even hear Mike Lindell screaming about voting machines when you hold a seashell up to your ear. Watch, I'll prove it.
Get one machine, open it up, and look at the in there.
You did great. Arguably, the first big test of whether Republicans could prove they were a normal governing party was in the speakership vote in January, a test they failed miserably after it took 15 rounds to elect Kevin McCarthy as their new speaker. And one of their members tried to physically assault another one on the House floor, leading to this infamous photo of a Republican congressman being restrained by his face so that he couldn't punch out a colleague. He looked like he just got to a house party and found out there was salsa in the crudité. That's an affront to God, you son of a bitch! So Republicans failed that test, but they had a second chance to make things right during President Biden's State of the Union address. All they had to do was sit there and listen and not be insane. Just be normal. Unfortunately, it seems like some of them skipped their electroshock therapy because they spent the night heckling and yelling incoherently from the back rows like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who was seen screaming and pointing fingers in a white fur coat like a Long Island dance mom about to get her final warning. Ma'am, how many times do we have to tell you to sit down? How many times do I have to tell Mike Haley to get your gosh darn steps right? Why is she wearing a white fur coat to the State of the Union address? She looks like an old rapper's first wife. With that said, it probably should not have shocked us that Greene decided to act like an obnoxious weirdo at the State of the Union, given that just a few hours before the speech, she posted a video of herself walking the halls of Congress while holding a single white balloon, and what I'm guessing was supposed to be some sort of statement about Joe Biden's handling of the suspected Chinese spy balloon. I mean, look at her. She looks like she threw herself a Sweet 16 party and no one showed up. Maybe everybody went to the other shakies. Now, Biden did give them plenty of opportunities to be normal. He ticked through a series of what should have been bipartisan applause lines, but the new Republican Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, sitting behind Biden for the first time, made a show of refusing to stand or applaud. In fact, McCarthy couldn't even bring himself to applaud when Biden simply condemned the January 6th insurrection and said nice things about democracy.
2 years ago, democracy faced its greatest threat to the Civil War, and today, though bruised, our democracy remains unbowed and unbroken.
That's the face of a guy who knows that every time he claps for Joe Biden, his phone call from Donald Trump gets 11 minutes longer. And somehow the ring gets louder when he calls too. Oh! Hello, Mr. Trump. How does he change my ringtone? You know what? Let me switch back to my other phone.
Get one machine, open it up, and look what's in there.
I knew calling you back was a mistake, but I couldn't change the script. It was too late. I thought the first time you'd do better and we'd call it back, but then I couldn't signal them to. So anyway, it was fine. You did great both times. No, we won't be. We won't be needing you tomorrow. Now, Biden definitely took. There's no one in there. No, Biden definitely took some digs at Republicans, to be sure, like when he touted his bipartisan infrastructure bill and said he'd even fund projects in districts where Republican members of Congress voted against the bill.
I want to thank my Republican friends who voted for the law and my Republican friends who voted against it as well. But I still get asked to fund the projects in those districts as well. But don't worry. I promised I'd be a president for all Americans. We'll fund these projects. And I'll see you at the groundbreaking.
It's a very, very Biden line. I'll see you at the groundbreaking. I'll shake your hand, kiss your baby. I'll give your wife a ride in my Stingray. Gonna have a lot of fun. In fact, Biden really leaned into economic populism in his speech, tackling things the vast majority of Americans hate, like absurdly high prices for insulin, surprise medical bills, high concert prices, jacked up by Ticketmaster, and junk fees at banks and airlines. At one point, he even said he wanted to eliminate surprise fees at hotels.
I know how unfair it feels when a company overcharges you and gets away with it. Not anymore. We've written a bill to stop it all. It's called the Junk Fee Prevention Act. We're going to ban surprise resort fees that hotels charge on your bill. Those fees can cost you up to $90 a night at hotels that aren't even resorts.
I mean, you know Joe Biden has stayed at a Motel 6 expecting better accommodation. These aren't even resorts, folks. No water slide, no golf course, and you gotta pay for the continental breakfast. Plus, those metal chairs by the pool give me waffle thighs. And that focus on economic populism is what led to the big moment of the night when Biden called out Republicans for proposing cuts to Social Security and Medicare and threatening to hold the country hostage over the debt ceiling unless Democrats acquiesce. It led to a lot of Republican heckling, including that moment we showed you earlier with Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Instead of making the wealthy pay their fair share, some Republicans want Medicare and Social Security to sunset. I'm not saying it's a majority. Let me give you, anybody who doubts it, contact my office. I'll give you a copy. I'll give you a copy of the proposal. That means Congress doesn't vote. Well, I'm glad to see it. I'm not saying it's a majority of you. I don't even think it's even a significant, but it's being proposed by individuals. I'm not politely not naming them, but it's being proposed by some of you.
Okay, first of all, in a split screen with these two, I'm definitely less inclined to believe the lady who's dressed like she's leaving her entire fortune to her cat. Oh, that's right. You can all laugh at me now. Oh, laugh it on Marjorie. But when I go, you get nothing. Nothing, you hear me? Mr. Poppenscotch, on the other hand, will live like a king. Let's go, Mr. Poppenscotch. Why are you clawing at me, you turncoat? You want to stay with them? Fine, I'll just bury myself with it. Also, it's generally not an effective tactic to debate the one guy in the room with a podium and a microphone, especially when you have to scream from the back row without a microphone. That was like watching a rap battle between Eminem and Shy Ronnie. SNL classic. When you scream from the back, you look like a crazy person yelling at the bus driver because he refused to drop you off at the racetrack. And Greene, isn't the only one who made a big show disagreeing with Biden. There was also Utah Senator Mike Lee, who pretended to be utterly confused as to what Biden could possibly be referring to when Biden said he would not allow the country to default on its debt if Republicans demanded cuts to safety net programs.
We're not going to be moved into being threatened to default on the debt if we don't respond. Folks.
I'm sorry, are you really confused, or are you just acting like you're in an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm? You said you would cut Medicare, Larry. I don't think I did. Yes, you did, Larry. Not true, Susie. Yes, it is, you bald and in Mike Lee's case, it would be true because he campaigned on eliminating Medicare and Social Security when he first ran for Senate back in 2010.
I'm here right now to tell you one thing that you probably haven't ever heard from a politician. It will be my objective to phase out Social Security, to pull it up by the roots and get rid of it. Here, brother. People who advise me politically always tell me that's dangerous, and I tell them, in that case, it's not worth my running. That's why I'm doing this, to get rid of that. Medicare and Medicaid are of the same sort and need to be pulled up.
I mean, that's an insane thing to admit on camera in American politics. Have you ever been to a polling place? Half the people in there are on their way to cash a Social Security check. Well, I have 2 errands. I guess it's going to be a nap day. It's almost as bad as complaining about the price of salsa for your crudité. Here's my reaction to finding out that Mike Lee called on camera for eliminating Social Security. And he's not the only one. Senators Rick Scott and Ron Johnson both floated plans that would sunset Social Security and Medicare by putting them up for periodic votes that would subject them to cuts. And Georgia Republican Congressman Rick Allen said he would raise the retirement age because he claims people come up to him and say they want to work longer.
What about raising the age of retirement?
You know, that's interesting that you asked that question. People come up to me, they actually want to work longer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that's on the table, you're saying?
Well, you know, if people want to work longer, maybe you need to give them an incentive to do it.
No, that's wrong. If people want to work longer, you don't need to give them an incentive because they already want to do it. You need incentives for things people don't want to do, like working longer because you made that story up. As far as I can tell, the only person who actually wants to work longer is Joe Biden. Everyone thought that dude would hang it up after he was vice president at the age of 74, but he watched Obama do it and said, hey, I'd like to have the world's hardest job and do it into my 80s. Plus, I hear they bring you free balloons. And honestly, who can blame Biden for wanting to stick around when these are his opponents? Biden thrives when compared to the current era of Republicans. Remember, Biden ran for president twice, never got close. Ran against Trump, boom, he's in the Oval Office. The beginning of his address last night wasn't anything special. But then these lunatics started heckling, and you could see him lick his lips, and everyone thought, okay, Grandpa came to play. These guys make Biden look like a Harlem Globetrotter, even though trotting isn't exactly his strong suit. If only he had Marjorie Taylor Greene's balloon, he could have just floated up the stairs. Biden could not have asked for a better contrast than the one he got last night. A screaming lady in a white fur coat and a party that straight up lied about his past support for cutting or sunsetting programs that Americans overwhelmingly support. Biden rattled off applause lines while McCarthy was stone-faced and Green stomped her feet so hard it was
Groundbreaking.
This has been a closer look